Are you conscious of your addiction? Refuse to be defined by it? Not satisfied with living your life on the surface? Are you drawn to deeper meaning and purpose? And believe that it's possible to grow through your addiction to experience true freedom? Well, welcome home. Share the journey from addiction to freedom with your host, Michael Gregory.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Addiction to Freedom. And today my guest is Patricia Love. She is someone who really kind of walks her talk. We've just had a really interesting conversation, and I think you're really going to enjoy unpacking, particularly not just really for women, even though she focuses on women's empowerment and transformation. I think it's relevant to everybody. She's written a book called Seen and Unheard, and I really recommend that you kind of check that out. What we really talked about is just a little bit about how kind of past can kind of, in a way, condition us to put walls up, and in a way that can, in some ways, prevent us from getting the very things that we're really wanting, and we did talk about, the desire for connection and being acknowledged and things like that. And we briefly touched on how some of these behaviours can become repetitive and in some ways subtle forms of addiction. So, or even major forms of addiction. And Patricia's got, a very powerful story there, how she's come through her own experience of, being at rock bottom and then unpacking that and rebuilding. Quite amazing. So you're going to really enjoy this episode, and I really appreciate the time I've spent with Patricia today. Well, welcome, Patricia. It's really, really nice to meet you. We've just had a little chat before I hit the record button. That was nice. But I didn't want to get too far into things because I didn't want to kind of miss the gold for our kind of recorded chat.
I know, because it's really easy just to kind of like start chatting and like, oh, I forgot to record
That's right.
that.
Sometimes really, it's just because it's so relaxed and off camera, a lot of good stuff is there. So, like I was saying just before, my interest is in how I kind of think we all have addictions. And it's not just the obvious ones that everyone kind of stereotypes in terms of drug addictions, or it's a little bit more wide range now. We can have codependence addiction and love addiction and gaming addiction, online, social media and all that kind of thing. But I think there's even more subtle addictions. And I think we were about to start touching on that. And I was really curious to see what you thought, maybe perhaps from your own experience, or I know you've had a bit of a journey there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think that addiction is a wide range, can be very small, but, to the individual, that addiction could be almost debilitating. It could be, because it's just depending on what it's causing you. For instance, in my world, I found that the behaviors that I was doing on a pretty regular basis and kind of doing the same thing over and over again, and kind of getting always that same result, because I couldn't break or interrupt that addiction or interrupt that behavior, you might say. And I found that what I was doing was a lot of behavioral addiction. And a lot of that was learned or not learned in some ways when I was growing up and I was younger, because I didn't have the people to encourage me, to inspire me, to teach me about finances, to teach me about relationships, to teach me about drugs, to teach me about anything, because I just kind of grew up with a very unemotional father and a mother that was an alcoholic. So I came into an addiction from somebody else. And so her job, that I like to say, was, I just need to get rid of Patricia right now so I can drink. So her goal was to like, go take the car, go play with your friends, go do anything, just get out of my way.
Okay. So this your mum was.
So there was never any abuse. Yeah.
Your mum was asking you to go and do something so that she could get plastered.
Exactly. And it was always so interesting because when you're growing up, you don't get that, right? You don't really understand that. You think it's normal. But kids, we're like sponges. And so we learn what we live at that time. So what I was taught, which ended up putting me into more behavioral addiction, I like to say, is a father that did not know how to hug me, love me. And to give a good example, and I like to say this, is that he would write his birthday cards to me or a Christmas card, happy birthday, Mr. Jack M. Love, not dad, not anything. So it was like, so for me, it was having that plus the mother that just didn't know how to love. And so she was just coping with the father. So they had their own stories. But at the time when you're growing up, you don't know and understand that. You just think, what's going on? I guess this is normal until you see other people's lives and other people's families and they're different than yours. And you're like, you almost cock your head in a way. And it's like, wow, that's interesting. Oh, I guess this is just the way it is. And so you learn to do that. But unfortunately, because of those behaviors you learn, when you get into your teen years, right, you start kind of rebelling and you start kind of doing things you probably shouldn't because you didn't get that attention. So you're looking and craving for attention. So that became an addiction, is finding that love, finding that, somebody to care about me. And I mentioned earlier is like in my 20s, fortunately, I was raped twice and within a couple years, and it threw me also in a tizzy. So I was looking for love in all the wrong places because I was just searching for why can't somebody love me, or maybe I can buy love because my father bought me presents. So that was the way he showed love. So then I turned into that trying to buy love in relationships, which that didn't work. So I had a continual cycle of addiction of bad behaviors, negative behaviors, finding all the wrong men, jumping into drugs, jumping into drinking, because that would also make me more, open, you might say. It always has a tendency, we believe, to make me feel better, but it doesn't make you feel better usually the next morning. But there was just a lot going on, you might say, at that time. So I would say that, yeah, having alcoholic mom and everything else, it was just a crazy, crazy time.
Yeah, that's I mean, I was listening to you there and I was right there with you. And then when you mentioned that you were raped twice and then kept on talking, I
Yeah.
was struggling still to stay with you because that kind of like hit me like a bomb. And I can't get. I mean, maybe obviously you're past that, but I mean, how does it happen?
Yeah, here's the thing.
Twice?
Do we ever really get past it?
Yeah,
I would have to say, yes. Do you learn to live with it? And you learn as you grow older that it's not you. But I also see that because I talk with women that have been raped too or had abuse,
yeah,
of some sort. And they too, you move forward, but you don't forget.
mm,
Because it's like anything, there's a complete violation when that happens. And actually, the one of the rapes was by a stranger because I had a flat tire and he supposedly was going to help me. And the second one was actually ended up being a boyfriend who threw me in a hospital after the fact. So it's, two different situations, two different reasons. You do have to learn to forgive that, but it also, because I blamed myself, of course. But as you move through, I was really good at compartmentalizing, which is what a lot of people are, whether they're in an addiction or whether, going through different things, because they put a mask on
mm,
to get through the day.
yeah,
And I think that also, you're not careful, that becomes a slight addiction too, because you're becoming somebody that you're not. And addiction, what it does is it makes you somebody that you're not, depending on what kind of addiction you are. I mean, obviously there's drugs and different things, but yeah. So there's a lot of negative behaviors, addictions that a lot of different people have. And I think some people kind of get caught up in like, well, I'm not an alcoholic, I just social drink. But they also have negative behaviors that are creating a very negative response in life and in their own happiness. So, because addiction really is just addicted to something that it's not really making you happy, but you just get addicted, whether it's sex, whether it's drinking, smoking, because you're distracting. You want to distract. And that's where I think that behaviors are an addiction too, because they're just trying to distract you until you learn and understand that you can interrupt them. Just like a regular smoking addiction, you can stop, but it's just whether or not you're ready. And you have to be ready because I can't tell you to stop drinking or stop smoking. You have to make that decision for yourself. In my case, it took a lot of years, but I had to get to the point where I got to the point where everything kind of hit the head at one time, rather than sometimes we get hit with little here and a little there, and you kind of move through things. I got hit with a lot of stuff at one time, whereas was wearing that mask, you might say, and I was really good at making money, but I was really good at spending it. So there was also a slight other addiction of just, making, spending, right? and I almost was out of control.
What was the mask? You mentioned before that there's a couple of things you mentioned. One was, I think you mentioned, you were looking for something that you didn't have. Let's say, your mum was telling you to go away and she wasn't available because she was getting drunk, and your father didn't, seem to be distant emotionally as well. And I'm curious, I'm wondering whether one of the things you were looking for, I think you mentioned it, that you wanted to, you're trying to buy love or get that connection, I suppose.
Yeah, I was looking for love. Looking for love. And I like to call it looking for love in all the wrong places, because people then, they don't understand the difference between love and sex a lot of times. And so when you're trying to get somebody to love you, then you become and do things maybe you wouldn't normally do because you want the attention. And I learned that because my dad would buy me things because he had, whether he had money or not, that's how he showed his love. So that in turn, I learned that, like, oh, okay, so he bought me that. Maybe if I buy something for somebody else, that they will love me, because but I didn't really completely understand all that till later in life, because there are times when you're like, you criticize your parents, like if they weren't drunk or if they would have done this, you play that victim mentality until you come to a point where, like, I can't do this anymore. And my point came at 57, which a lot of people will say, oh my God, that's how do you even change that? But I the real estate business in the States really it fell out. My husband had left. I had already been married, 3 times, or in many relationships. But my husband had left me for a younger woman. I was 40 pounds overweight. I was drinking way too much. In fact, this particular day, I was drunk on martinis. And I had no money at that point because I spent it all, because I was really good at making, but really good at spending. But unfortunately, I was at the bottom of where the real estate industry was, and was, how am I going to pay my rent next month? So when it comes to a head like that, you have a tendency to, like, okay, I just can't do this anymore. Or at least I did.
Yeah. So when you unpacked it all, what do you think was, I know there was external circumstances with the, global financial crisis and things like that, but you're relating it back to this being kind of like a culmination of your journey at that point, so what did you,
Yes.
when you unpacked it, what did you see as the root of that?
Well, actually, it's interesting you asked that question, because I think we all continue to unpack in some ways, right? But there was a period of time where, like, I said to myself, I can't keep doing this, because there's a lot less life in front of me than there is now behind me. So I actually have to get my shit.
What was the this that you can't, so that we can be clear, so I can be clear, what was the this that you wanted, that you said, I can't keep doing this? What's this?
Okay. What was this? What was that? It was the roller coaster. I was tired of the roller coaster of, on the high, making money, then on the low, scrambling for money, on the high of a great relationship, and then it all falling apart or me taking off and running away on the high of losing 20, 30 pounds and then, putting 40 pounds, 50 pounds back on. It was the roller coaster ride, which is all great when you're on a high, and you tend to forget the crash. But then you're just trying to get on that hamster wheel to keep going, to keep pedaling. And I was just pedaling so much all the time. I just was like, I can't do this anymore. I got to make some changes in my life. And I have to disrupt. So I had to get really truthful with myself. And I think with a lot of people, it's hard for them to acknowledge the truths that maybe they played parts in a lot of things that happen in your life, that there was a lot of negativity, or I have negativity, and maybe I was judgmental, and maybe I was too quick to react. I had to acknowledge that I wasn't perfect, that I was flawed, and that's not easy for people to admit. It's like an alcoholic saying, my mother, she quit drinking, and she quit drinking at 55, which would have made me about 20 something, and 29. But she had to have a come to reality to change her life. None of the family could help her. You have to, because they start sneaking and do things. So it was the same thing. I had to decide and make the decision. Do I want to change, and am I willing to change? And what I came up with is I have to change because I never want to be on the floor like this again in my condominium, drunk, broke, overweight, no relationship, nobody around to help me, and money just out the door. I never wanted to go back there again. And that to me was my why. And I actually ended up writing that why down so that I could read it periodically. So I would, if I, how you sometimes get complacent a little bit and you can fall back until you create habits, until you can fall back into it, like smoking or alcoholism or anything like that. If you're not careful, you get kind of used to oh, I can take a drink. Oh, I can take a puff. I can do this. To me, no, I could not go back. And I didn't want to slip back into that negative behavior because it was easy to do because it's comfortable, right? It's comfortable.
Totally. It's the familiar. And I mean, I noticed your book is called Seen and Unheard. And I was wondering if there's a connection there between, the root of, your cyclic kind of boom and bust behavior. Was it something to do with being unheard?
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people are seen, and especially women, they're seen and not listened to.
Uh-huh.
And or unheard. And it started with me when I was a child at 3 years of age, believe it or not. And I remember it pretty clearly that I was walking down the street with my sister and my mother, and a woman stopped my mom and looked at me, and she was a black lady. She looked at me and says, "You have such a beautiful little girl." And I looked at this lady and said, "Yes, but did you notice my eyelashes? And why are you so black?" And my mother she went crazy. She started walking away, and she got around the corner. She put her finger in my face and said, "You never say that anything like this again. You are to be seen and not heard, unless you're spoken to."
Well, that's like the old...
You embarrassed me. So for a child, that was like, oh my God, I upset my mother. I embarrassed my mother, but yet the lady was so kind, because she answered back and she said, "Well, yes, I did notice your lashes, and I was born black." And she was the nicest person in the world.
Yeah.
But my mom being an alcoholic, she was up and down all the time. But I remember this. And so that was the first thing, is like, I guess I should be quiet, not speak. And then it kind of goes, when you grow up, the images and the situations you're in, a lot of women get thrown into this, is almost a second class citizen in some cases, because, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough to take that job. And you don't need to be seen. Just sit there and look pretty. So, there was a lot of that. And so
when I talk to women, I've often heard them say, that they have to work twice as hard. And then when they get into the room at the seat at the table that they've earned probably 2 times over, and when they share their
Right.
ideas, it's not until somebody a man repeats that idea as if it's his, and then everyone agrees with it. And
That's exactly true, and
it's like as if you
I
didn't even
worked in
say
a
it in the first
dominated,
place.
men's world. Yeah, exactly, yeah, I said it, but it didn't become real until somebody else said it, and another gender, the man. So, yeah, there's a lot of that in the workplace, a lot of that in just in relationships, also because between your significant others, if you're talked down to, you tend to learn to, if I'm just quiet and I don't talk back, I won't be in trouble.
If you don't kind of
And
exist
there's a
and be
piece of
yourself.
that, especially in relationships. Yeah. Yeah. And in work, it's like, why did you say that? That just sounded stupid, in work sometimes. So it's a constant battle. And I think, and hopefully it's changing. But I wrote the book because I really want women to know that I see them and I hear them. And the more that people can listen to not just men and women, because men are unheard too a lot of times, but it's really saying, I want to hear you because what you say is worthwhile. And that's all people really want is they want to be acknowledged. They want to be acknowledged and respected, whether you're a man or woman or gender, whatever gender you may be, you want respect. And I think that's not asking a lot of anybody, but it seems to be very hard for a lot of people to give out.
Yeah, yeah, and then just to follow on from that, I totally agree with you. But and to follow on from that is, on a deeper level, we're looking, I think, for connection. Somehow being understood and seen in your terms is a kind of the feeling of connection, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a feeling of connection because actually, as people, we were born to be kind of brought up in a village in a lot of ways, where everybody cared for each other and took care of one another, right? Because we need community. It's like if you isolate somebody for a long period of time, right? As an individual, they can go insane.
Mm,
They can go crazy because they don't have that connection. So we're always striving for that connection and learning how to even connect with ourselves. But if you can learn to be comfortable with you and connect with yourself, you can get through a lot more things than not having, to worry about the connectivity of everybody else. And let me explain that. For instance, like during COVID,
uh-huh.
there was a disconnect from so many people, right? And so there was a mental health issues because people didn't like being alone. They didn't want to be alone. And a lot of it is because they never learned to be alone and to love who they were and be okay with this while they move through this craziness
Mm,
pandemic. So the people that kind of went in and learned to love themselves a little bit more and find out who they are and that they're good people and they deserve, those people were able to maneuver through this pandemic much easier than other people.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things coming to mind as you speak, in terms of just connecting up from some of the things that you said earlier about your history and upbringing and things that we're looking for this connection. And I was just thinking that even though everyone, I suppose, really love that to have that kind of connection, it's also kind of this inherent self-interest that kind of gets in the way of connecting with others, because we're so, like you said before, you kind of put on a mask in order to cope. And we're kind of in this conundrum where we've got to wear the mask in order to feel safe, but we desperately don't want to really wear that mask because we want to connect. How do you deal with that? I think women
Well, and the hard part of it, all of it is it comes down to trust.
trust.
Yeah, it comes down to
Yeah, yeah,
trust.
but the thing is that we don't put the mask on intentionally. I mean, maybe we do sometimes, but a lot of the time, the reactions that we have in relationships are often subconscious, and we have to become aware of those in order to grow. So a lot of the mask is actually just an automatic, fight or flight self-protective mechanism. It's not an easy thing to just take it off like a set of clothing.
No,
And make mistakes. We're constantly trying to get that connection in other ways that are safe, but still at a distance, So we're kind of, shooting ourselves in the foot all the time.
it's hard, and it's because it's vulnerable, and people
Yeah,
don't like to be vulnerable. And that's what I when I use the word trust, it's trusting in yourself that it's going to be okay. But that's really hard if you're wearing these masks because you're trying to be safe and keep yourself safe, which is, something that's instinctive in us is to
yeah,
keep ourselves safe, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so it's a real fight in so many ways, and to be able to say, wait a minute, I'm going to be not only vulnerable to others and take a chance, but also
Yeah.
be vulnerable with myself and say that
Mm.
I'm flawed, or I'm not, that maybe I need to make some changes and start
Yes.
slowly making them. And then it's going in is, and everybody says, loving yourself, but it really is just going in and finding out who you are and
Mm.
what
So,
you want to be. And yeah.
so with that, because I totally agree with you there. What do you mean by that of going in and finding out who you are? How is that for you?
For me, it came down to I just want to feel peaceful every single day.
Uh-huh.
And everybody's going to be slightly different. But for me, knowing I did the best I could do, because it's always a path. It's always new. You're learning every single day, and you can't expect to be turn around and be like everything's fine. It's all good now. It's a constant journey because you have constant triggers. There's triggers from other people. There's triggers from your past. There's triggers from, like somebody, if I see something that's maybe about a rape, that triggers something like, it makes me think about it, not maybe to debilitating or anything, but just brings it back up. And so I have to then reassure myself, you're taking the right direction. You're keeping yourself safe. You're learning to trust. And I think the main thing is people need to understand is it's all baby steps. It's all very simple, one step at a time, and give yourself some grace because we all have struggles. I mean, life is a beautiful struggle to me, and it's just the way it's always going to be. And it's a matter of how you decide that you are going to handle these different things. And, for me, I did not want to ever be financially in a financing situation where I didn't have any money. So I had to decide that I needed to learn about money because I never learned about it. I didn't understand it. So, and so a lot of this is just educating yourself that, oh, I can do that. So if I just pay this off and keep paying that off, because I was like $140,000 in debt too, which I had to pay off. And I just, took one step at a time to do this. And when you see little baby steps that go forward and you decide I'm going to celebrate every baby step, then those baby steps get bigger and bigger because your confidence now is growing because you're feeling that you are able to do things and move forward. But it's always a journey. It's always something, and everybody's slightly different.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm kind of getting there is that your method was to identify the things that were really that you never wanted to
Yeah,
happen again, and then
right,
make a plan around those and do baby steps towards
right.
that.
Well, actually, Michael, I had 5 words. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
5 words that I actually and interesting, and it's a story that it's for some people would think was a little woo woo, okay, but weird things happen to people. Interesting, and it's really what you believe, and if it works, that's great, right? So for me, when that day in 2009, and I have September of 2009, when I was on that floor and everything was just falling apart, the husband left for a younger woman, I was in debt, and all these things. I'm also very much of a pet lover, and I also believe that they give value to us in so many ways. And I had a cat that was 13 at the time, and I felt this because I was crying. I mean, literally, I was like down in the dumps. And her name was Hula, and she put her paw on me, and I looked over, and all I could see were these big eyes. And I swear that there was this energy that came through me that said, "Take your power back. You've given your power away to too many people, to too many things, to too many, situations. Take your power back." And this energy came up through me. And the next thing I knew, I had 5 words that just popped into my head. And those 5 words I immediately wrote down. I had no idea at the time why I was writing them down. I just said, I better write these suckers down. So, and the 5 words were acknowledgement, forgiveness, mindset, accountability, and perseverance. And then I added later on gratitude, but those were the 5 words that for me I live by every single day, because I acknowledge anything that is going on. I had to learn to forgive my rapist. I had to learn to forgive my father. I had to learn to forgive my mother. They had their own stories, and it's not there. But as a kid, as a child, I didn't understand that, and I was just learning what I lived. But as an adult, I can make those changes. I didn't make them until later in life, but as an adult, you have and you can choose. I didn't have the choices as a child, you know. And so I live by those words every day. And my perseverance word, that's my why. Because I wrote out my why, because I never wanted to be back there, and I've never gone back there. Now, have I taken 2 steps forward sometimes and a half step back? Yes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah,
normal, right?
yeah. It's like I find that the patterns, sometimes they just be. It's like onion layers. They become less obvious, and you go, oh, you discover, oh, that's that same pattern, but in a more subtle way. And so then you deal with it at a more subtle level.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we have a tendency when we start to learn about ourselves, we become much more intuitive. We become much more understanding, and you listen more to yourself. You listen to that intuition. You listen to that, or you hear more. When you're on a hamster wheel, like most people are, until they pause and get off, they don't hear anything, because their brain's just going like this. So you have to learn to actually chill out. And I don't mean meditate necessarily, but just quietate is my new word. Quietate and focus, and you really start seeing and feeling those things. And then those small little things that maybe that onion peeled back that day, you're like, yeah, you know what? I can see that. Let me see if I can work on that. And acknowledge that, you're going to be working on things for the rest of your life. It just gets a little easier sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about your work with. I know that you work with women to help them, in a way, I suppose, kind of emulate your transformation. I'm guessing, is that how do you do that? I mean, what kind of what tools do you how do you work with women in whatever what kind of things do you work
Capacity.
with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I work with do work with women, and I work with women. Actually, they have different things that are going on in their lives, but it all leads back to self-esteem and confidence when it comes
Uh-huh.
down to it. That seems to all go back to that confidence level and that self-esteem and not good enough, because somewhere down the line something has affected them, and which again was I can relate to. But it also is interesting, some people are very confident in their work area because that's they can do really well, but when they come home and their personal life, it sucks.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're
Yeah.
really good at work, and they're maybe good at making money in some cases, but they're really bad in their personal lives and maybe have been divorced. And so it's not a balance. And so there a lot of women are looking for a balance, but they're looking for confidence and self-esteem, because I believe that confidence creates freedom. Because the more confident, and I don't mean boastful and conceited or arrogant, I mean just
Yeah.
being assertive and just being comfortable in your own skin to say no, and to create boundaries.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have the boundaries, and a lot of women were yes people in so many ways. Because if some people have children, they've got to take care of things. They're like they say yes to PTA stuff. They say yes, and then they go, "Why did I do that? Because I
Yeah.
don't have the time to do that." So they had
Yeah.
to learn that it's okay to say no, and that boundaries can build your confidence. And they find out that will still like them, because the problem is that most women are people pleasers,
Mm.
and they're trying to please everybody else, but they forget to take care of themselves. So that's pretty much what I do every day.
Wonder why that's happens to women, do you think?
Because I think it innately, we have a very nurturing type of nature. Because of women birth children, we have an automatic nurturing gene, you might say. And of course some men do too. I'm not saying that they don't.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just talking about women right now. But women have a tendency, because they birth, and there's this automatic mothering and caring and nurturing, and let me help you, let me do see what I can do for you. Now, and not all women, but a
Yeah.
good portion of them. And but it can take them to a level where they're now taking away from themselves completely, and so they're empty inside. They haven't filled up their gas tank, and so they're give, and then they basically just, I can't give anymore. And so they have to learn to love yourself first. It's kind of like when you're flying on an airplane. What do they automatically say? And I used to be a flight attendant years ago. Is that when the oxygen drops down, put it on your face first, then you put it on your child's. Because if you're not breathing, you can't help anybody else.
Yeah. 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 Well, that there's
Yeah.
age-old wisdom in that, in a sense, looking
Well,
at
a lot of this
your
isn't
own.
rocket science. Honestly, it's just a matter of, do we here's the funny thing, is that we all know a lot of this, but do we do it? Oh, I know
Yeah.
about that. I should do that.
Yeah. 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 So how does your program help women kind of put this into action? Is it a step-by-step
Well,
process, or is
yeah.
it a coaching thing, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, I call it my five diamonds, because I believe that we're all diamonds in the rough, and but diamonds are strong, and they come from the ground, and you just have to sometimes we just have to keep polishing them up and creating the more diamonds and the facets and the different things. But my five diamonds are my five words that I mentioned to you earlier: the acknowledgement, the forgiveness, the mindset, accountability, and perseverance. And that's my core of it. But I also believe you have to listen to each individual woman, because every one of us is different in so many ways, yet all the same. But everybody learns differently. Everybody needs to, and they need to be listened to, so that I can understand really, where is the issue. Is the issue with relationships and your boundaries and not saying no? Or is it maybe you have anger because of something in your past? I don't know yet. So it's kind of like there's a program, but you can, it can go a little bit here and there, just because nobody's exactly the same. I wouldn't want to be treated exactly the same, because everybody wants to be acknowledged. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. So I want to make sure I see and hear every one of those people, and listen to them, what they're saying, and listening to what they're saying, and what they're not saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess you can, that's where you can, that's as a coach, or that's where you can come in and help shine some light on those areas.
Exactly. And a lot of it is just shining your light on a lot of it. And it's just because a lot of them will go, oh, yeah, I do that all the time, but I just forgot about it. And it's just bringing it out to light, and not mixing, not trying to be too nice, because I always tell my clients, I'm like, look, this could, some of this, coaching could make you cry. you know some of it, because you may need to go deeper than you wanted to go, But you need to go there in order to come out and have those bricks come off of your shoulders, because we're holding up in so much stuff sometimes that when you can actually talk about it and get it out, it's like that's almost the relief right there. And then it just becomes habit, of understanding and being aware of it and what triggers you. Because that's the main thing, is like, what's triggering you? And people don't really think about that much, when they get angry, like, well, now I know what's triggering me and I can watch for it.
Well, it sounds to me like it's kind of a process of seeing yourself as well as being seen by yourself, I suppose, so that
It
you can
totally
then.
is all being seen within. It's seeing who you are and then
Mm,
who you want to be, and
mm,
what kind of addiction do you have? What are you addicted to saying yes all the time? Are you do not have any boundaries? And a lot of times, I find that women, especially, they do have a pretty strong work ethic, and they're pretty confident in most cases. But a lot of it comes from the personal part of their life, which seems to be a lot of shambles. At least a lot of the people that I work with. So for me, I wanted to make sure that all women were able to be coached. And so I mentioned earlier that it's not out yet, but within the next 2 weeks, that I created a app called Confident You, that I can hopefully help women work through a lot of things more in a group effort, but also some one-on-one a little bit. So that's what my goal is.
nice. Oh, great. What's it called?
Confident You, like confident and then you with it's
Oh,
almost like
yeah.
university, but put the you at the end.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm laughing because I know I shouldn't say it, but it's kind of the opposite of Despicable Me, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Confident
Exactly. In
you.
some cases, it's
Yeah.
like we think of ourselves, oh my God, but we're going to turn that despicable me back around into a confident you. So.
But can I ask? We've touched on it along the way, that we're all kind of working on various addictions and things. And I'm kind of curious. Do you have anything that you feel that you're working on at the moment?
Oh,
If that's okay to ask.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. And I am still working on that confidence a bit, because there's still, when you have years and years of people kind of telling you you're not good enough, even though I can react to it better and get out of it quicker, I still have these like, oh my God, am I good enough to do this? You know,
Yeah,
am I
yeah,
smart enough? And then, but as soon
yeah,
as I hear those things come out of my head or out of my mouth, I immediately stop it. Like, no, you're really smart. You realize how far you've come. And
yeah,
so you really have to have a conversation with yourself sometimes, because that
yeah.
little voice can really mess you up if you're not
Mm,
careful.
mm,
So I try to
mm.
kind of cut it at its legs quickly, but it's still
Yeah,
there. And
yeah.
I think everybody would be lying if they didn't say that they didn't feel that way sometimes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like we were saying before, there's onion layers of various, levels of subtlety of the same pattern.
That's
But
right.
it, I mean, that voice that you're talking about is essentially thoughts, isn't it? But it's
Oh
more
yeah,
than
it's
just
that
thoughts.
thoughts or triggers. Or it's triggers,
Yeah,
things that
but
trigger you.
it's also believing the thoughts, isn't it? It's like, anyone can
Yes,
have the
and
same
that's
thoughts.
why
But
affirmations are so important.
yeah, yeah. Because I've been thinking
And,
about, in fact, I was only thinking about this, I think this morning or yesterday, just about belief, because a while ago I kind of realized that belief is a set of thoughts. A belief is a set of thoughts, but it's not,
Mhm.
it's more, so that's one component of it. The other component is what makes that set of thoughts a belief versus just a set of thoughts. Why is one a belief and one not, Because a belief is
Right.
also something that, if I believe it, then it's personal to me. And what I realized is that the thing that changes it from just a set of thoughts for me to a belief is whether I take that set of thoughts and make it part of what I call me, you know, and whether I take it on as part of me, that I am confident or I am weak or things like that, because when I say I am confident or I am weak, they're just words, that means nothing except if I take it in and I think it's actually defining me and a description of me. I think a lot of times overcoming these beliefs is starting to understand that that's kind of the mechanism of what it is, and that there's a bigger part of us that's actually able to look at that and go, hang on a minute, that isn't necessarily a definition of me. Yes, I did behave in that way, and I did believe that at one time, but right now I can look at that and go, no, there's more to me than just that, you know?
But that, yeah, and I completely agree. But it's also getting to that point where you can have that conversation with yourself. Because until you learn that they are just words, and those words, you can take those words any way you want to, and you can either turn them into the belief that I'm not good enough, or you can turn them into the belief that I am confident at thing. So you have to make a decision, which way am I going to believe? And that's really becoming more and more in tune with who you are. And then that it slowly builds where you can have that conversation with yourself. Before, I remember when I first started, and I had to plaster. I did like little post notes all over the place, right? Like, you're fabulous, you can do this. And I had to have something in my face to remind me. I even put things in my pockets, and so I would accidentally pull something out, and there would be a surprise sign like, "You did awesome today." It's I had to really put that belief into my system so that it became habit. So it becomes habit because everything is a habit, whether you're good habits or bad habits. And it's so much, unfortunately, it's easier to make bad habits than it is to crack them and turn them into good habits sometimes. But it takes a while, and people give up too quickly. When it's really a lifetime or a lifestyle change, it's kind of like, wait. I try to tell people I was 40, 50 pounds overweight, but I didn't want to diet. I wanted to just change my lifestyle. I wanted to eat well on a regular basis and still enjoy life. Same thing with learning to be in tune with yourself, is creating those good habits. And you fall back here and there because you're human. And I think people need to give themselves grace. They need to say, hey, well, I didn't do such a great job today, but hey, I did good. Tomorrow I'll do better. It's a matter of how you speak to yourself. Because if you talk to people a lot and listen to people, and I found that listening to others people too, and excuse me for interrupting you, was that I learned so much from what they were saying and how I didn't want to be.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it is, yeah, there's a lot in that, just to be able to listen. And, often the times that we don't listen are often the times when our own kind of stuff is coming up, preventing us from listening, the times that are probably the most important time to listen.
Exactly. But you're learning, I learned to, like, oh, wait a minute. I'm making this about myself now. No, let me make it about the person that's in front of me. Let me listen to them, refocus. Because I can catch myself unfocusing, but I also can bring myself back. But that's a learned habit. It's a learned thing, whereas, which that's why when I say it becomes easier and easier, because it becomes a habit and it becomes very natural as we keep growing. And then you have this appetite of you wanting to learn more and more and understanding more about you and listening to your intuition more and understanding and listening to other people. And it becomes exciting, actually, because you're really becoming a new you, but you're being a better person, I think, in the long run to help others also.
Yeah, I totally agree. I see that with my clients as well with the stop smoking program. Once they stop smoking, they realize that, hang on a minute, I never thought that I could ever do this. I thought this was impossible. but now I actually have done what I thought was impossible. And the next thing they think is, well, I wonder what else I can do that I think is impossible. Wonder how else I can change, and they start looking around at the next thing in their life to change and realizing that if you get the right skills and the right support, you can change in positive ways, and you're not hopeless. Things can improve, and it's really empowering. And I think that, in other words, that you start to get this sense that what you think you are is perhaps not all that you are. And I love that.
Well, yeah, because we're limitless.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we're limitless.
yes,
And our brain, of course, is limitless because we don't even use like a small portion of it anyway. So, can you imagine if we actually utilized what we had, what we could do? And that's why I keep saying to myself, it's like the more I learn and the more I grow, the more I read, the more I educate myself. When I say that, because I didn't go to college, I dropped out. So, I didn't have a formal education, but that doesn't stop you from learning, because when you educate yourself and grow, it expands your world.
oh, totally. I
And if you can
totally agree.
expand your world, you know that you can do things are unlimited. And it's just a matter, you're the one putting the limits on yourself
Totally.
and nobody else.
Yeah,
And I always tell my clients, I said, I can help you if you're willing to be helped
yeah,
or
yeah,
supported.
yeah.
I can do whatever, but you have to be willing to try new things,
Yeah,
you might
yeah,
say.
take a little step. Yeah, that's right. Well, look, I'd like to I thank you for spending the time. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been really interesting, and like we said in the beginning, I had no idea where it was going to go, but I had a sense that it would be really full of insights, and I think it has been. So thanks so
Yeah.
much, Patricia.
I learn every time I talk to people. I learn from you. I learned lots of stuff from you today. So that was good. That was awesome.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good. Same for me. So, all right. Well, thanks so much. And I just will say your book. Do you want to hold your book up there, just into the camera so everyone can see
Oh,
it?
sure. I have it right here, right behind me here. It just happened to be. Hopefully, it's not backwards. Seen and Unheard: Little Girl's Journey from Silence to Empowerment. And you can get it at Amazon,
Everywhere I've
and
seen.
Barnes and Noble here in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also my website, patricialove.com.
Yeah. No worries. Well, all right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll hopefully meet up again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye for now.